We have a very exciting subject today, and we have two industry stalwarts to speak about it, thinking growth, how BFSI L&D teams can scale for 10x growth. Imagine a BFSI organization that a few years ago maintained traditional training methods, was a cost center to whom CEOs would give a little budget at the end and reaching only a fraction of its employees effectively. Today, driven by digital transformation and rapid industry shifts, the same organization aims to scale its learning and development efforts tenfold to meet aggressive growth targets. It wants its L&D to be front and center to drive the performance of the company and to drive that at scale. In this discussion today, we will explore how BFSI L&D teams can think growth in a way that positions them to achieve 10x expansion, leveraging technology, agility, and strategic alignment. And for that, we have a unique mix of two industry stalwarts who bring a unique mix of both academia and real-world experience. So I'll start with you, Dr. Bindu. Dr. Bindu, with over 25 years of experience, operates at the confluence of banking, leadership development, and strategic capability building. Currently serving as head, Leadership Academy at Union Bank of India, she leads initiatives that nurture future leaders and strengthen institutional leadership pipelines. Previously as faculty at State Bank Staff College, she curated executive learning experiences aligned with the evolving needs of the banking sector. An IMA accredited management teacher and adjunct faculty at Manipal Global Education, she's passionate about translating leadership theory into practical frameworks that empower individuals and institutions to lead with clarity and purpose. Thank you so much, Dr. Bindu, for being here, and it's a pleasure to host you.
Thank you, Meghdud, and it's my honor to be part of this discussion. And I'm also thanking KNOLSKAPE for this invitation. Thank you. Looking forward to.
Likewise, ma'am. Our next panelist, Trevor Mark Fernandes, is a seasoned organizational development and behavioral science practitioner with 19 years of experience spanning Big Four management consulting and corporate roles. He's currently Executive Vice President, Human Resource and Head Organizational Development, Employee Experience, and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Kotak Life. He was named a Global Thought Leader by LinkedIn in 2022 and was recognized among BW People's HR 50 Under 50 Power Players in 2025, underscoring his influence in the HR and leadership space. Mark is also an ICF certified coach and a practicing mental health professional, reflecting his commitment to holistic employee well-being. Mark's HR philosophy centers on the belief that HR is the soul of an organization, emphasizing the importance of human connection, psychological safety, and authentic leadership. He encourages aspiring HR professionals to blend curiosity, courage, and deep subject knowledge to leverage both technology and empathy to drive organizational change. Mark is also an adjunct professor at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, is a kickboxing enthusiast, was a distance runner, and is also a theater artist. Mark, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today morning.
Thank you, Meghdud. That was a very flattersome introduction. Thank you.
And it's all you. So, considering that we have a limited time today, we'll dive straight in. And my first question is to you, Dr. Bindu. That against the backdrop in today's talent economy, where employee emotion is currency, what do you think is the mindset shift and behavior change that learning and development ought to bring about that can help teams drive more measurable and meaningful impact?
Thank you for that wonderful question, because this is something that I think all L&D strategists are reflecting on, and this is a topic which keeps getting discussed in all forums of HR. In my opinion, the most critical mindset shift that L&D needs to bring about is moving from being just a provider of training programs to becoming something like a driver of business capabilities. Now, let me explain this with an example. For years, our focus as an L&D has always been on providing inputs. For example, how many people have attended the program, or how many people have logged in the webinar, or what are the satisfaction ratings like how many people have completed the e-learning modules, right? So I consider these as just hygiene factors, right? So the real question that L&D must ask is, did the learning intervention help someone do their job better? Did someone become faster or efficient or smarter? So there lies the pivot, from learning as an activity or a task which needs to be done and dusted, to learning as an enabler of performance. Right? So this requires L&D to start thinking like a business function and not a service provider. Right? So look at it not as an event-based activity, but as something which provides business outcomes or impact base. Yeah. So this is what my take is on the criticality.
Wow, that's wonderful. And I think what really stood out there, Dr. Bindu, is the fact that we are looking at outcome-based approaches rather than completion rates. And for a very, very long time, L&D has been guilty of looking at completion rates and not business metrics. So thank you so much for setting the stage. Mark, your thoughts on the subject, please.
Very interesting point to make as a question in this discussion, because I think this is what boardrooms today are discussing largely. And I think the shift we need to make today isn't about just upskilling. I think it's about reframing L&D as a value accelerator. I think it's very, very important. And for that, it's about asking not what skills do we need, because that's what we typically end up doing at L&D, right? Asking what skills do we need. So it's not about asking what skills do we need. It is about asking what problems are we solving for through capability development. That will bring us closer to business. That will put a business focus into the entire L&D effort. And that's when you truly partner with the organization as, a learning partner. So it's not just about competence anymore. It's about application of that competence to solve a real-time business problem.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mark. And what I hear you say is that how do you actually ensure that the problem gets solved so that you're able to ensure that you're able to drive the business outcomes, ensure the KPIs are met, the KRAs are met, so that you're able to have that seat on the table for a very long time, which L&D has been deprived of. So thank you so much, and thank you for setting the stage with such insightful comments. And probably I'll go back to you, Dr. Bindu. You spoke about driver of business capability and also the fact that enabler of performance. From your experience, because for the longest times, KNOLSKAPE has recently done a survey, which is an L&D predictor report of 2025. And one of the things that stands out there is that while organizations today are looking at measuring, learning and development performance, but I'll just read this statistic out from the report itself. It says the NPS on the perceived importance of data and analytics in L&D is 56, which means that L&D professionals really are looking to measure the outcomes, drive those KPIs through these L&D interventions. But the dichotomy is that the NPS on the satisfaction with the current usage of data and analytics in the L&D decision making is minus 53, which means that people are not very happy with the tools available for them to be able to measure the outcomes, the business metrics. Do you agree with this, or do you see some differences or changes happening at Union Bank?
I'm actually surprised the way you brought in this dichotomy, because I guess I guess we have a different take here, because we are we are uh, we are we are a legacy organization. For us, we are looking at how do we thrive. We've got systems that we are finding it challenging to keep pace with what we have, the fintechs and the tech fins and the digital first banks, what they are doing, because for them it's all about scaling, like we were talking about. And the challenges that we face is with the regulatory tightening, where the regulator speaks about faster responses and constant upskilling. We've got the ease 8.0, which we need to be keeping up with. We've got fintechs who are eating our retail lending for since long, the lion's share. So we have to now do a complete overhaul and somehow protect our turf. So that's where I feel L&D is playing a key role in that kind of a spectrum, where how do we design this kind of a digital fluency where we are bringing in a difference at all levels, not only the IT teams. How do we make our people more and more agile, bring agility in their mindsets? I'm not talking about people, but I'm talking about their mindset. How do we bring, as Mark was talking about, that kind of a partnership skill? Like, for example, now we are talking about embedded finance. So the whole ecosystem today is all about collaboration, not just about internal excellence, which we have been enjoying for decades, right? So all these are actually headwinds, and we're working towards it. We are trying to find opportunities. We are trying to find ways to seize them. We are trying to have, like Mark was telling, go for the workflow and see how we can empower our people with micro-sized video, Netflix trailer mode of learning input. We are attempting all this. However, there are challenges, right? And legacy challenges, which we are trying to overcome.
Sure. So I hear you talk about digital fluency, bringing agile mindsets and bite-sized learning. And I know for a fact that today organizations are looking at reels available on Facebook, and that's the kind of learning nuggets that are getting created for Gen Zs and now Gen Alphas. Coming to you, Mark, you spoke about the importance of, how it's not about capability, but how do you ensure that you're able to solve that problem with the complete business focus? So at Kotak Life Insurance, and I know that there is a great focus that you have been driving in terms of ensuring that there is performance-driven metrics happening as far as the learning is concerned. What are some of these analytics or tools that you have been driving, or at Kotak Life Insurance is large? Has been driving to be able to measure some of these outcomes?
So what we've been looking at is a healthy mix of not just cognition, because cognitive learning is very important, and that's where your attendance, your ability to pick up what has been taught by the facilitator, reflect, all of that is important, right? Because it's the head, heart, gut alignment for complete body assimilation of learning. So
beautiful quote, Mark. Yes, please continue.
Yeah. So and the head is divided into two parts. There's the left brain and the right brain. And for the brain to function in its entirety, whatever speaks to both sides is equally important. So the right brain will talk about what is the change, the quality of reflection, the kind of learning, the content, and all of that to be measured, definitely. The left brain will also look at how is this translated into action, quantification. So for us, we look at it in terms of fungibility. How has my learning immersion or my learning intervention led to fungibility for the person in the roles they choose to apply to? So fungibility has a direct implication on job rotations. Has the learning enabled for me a wider platform of roles to pick up and partner with the organization on its growth? Two, the number of promotions we've had, because that also speaks to the way you delivered, the way you manned your role, manned your people, manned your matrices. Third, am I raising my hand more often than I used to on stretch projects, increasing my visibility by picking up things which I initially was scared or tepidly would not be sure whether I should pick it up or not. So we're seeing people raise hands and say, cross-functional project here, I'm available. I'd like to be a part of it. 3. 4, and very importantly, it is also to do with the person's own assessment. A year ago, on these matrices, in this area, this is what I looked at myself as in terms of my understanding of the subject, my willingness and permission to take effort based on what I had learned and make change happen. And where am I now on all of that? And fourth, and most importantly, I think it has to do with the entire sequence of saying, how has this learning translated for capability development for my team? Have I been able to translate that learning? Has the team's capability therefore increased because mine is increased? If we have tick marks on each of these buckets, it tells me that the learning intervention has been a successful one and a one that has spoken to business.
Yeah, I think you covered the self, the business, the customer, and also the team, obviously. But I think there was one underlying thought there which just stood out for me: the fact that somebody is picking up stretch assignments clearly shows that you've been able to create or engender that learning culture which allows for psychological safety to stand out, because very rarely a disengaged employee will pick up a stretch assignment. And I'll come back on this subject in a bit. But I'd like to ask both of you, and any one of you can take this, is we spoke about, Dr. Bindu, you spoke about bite-sized learning, agile mindsets, and Mark, you spoke about the head, the heart, the gut, and the fact that people, the business, the customer. I'll just bring the elephant in the room right now, and ensure that we talk about it so that it just becomes part of our conversation. How is AI helping us to be able to drive some of this? And Dr. Bindu, I understand that being a legacy organization, some of this might be a challenge. So how are you overcoming those challenges? So maybe we'll start with Mark. Mark, your thoughts on this, and maybe then we'll move to Dr. Bindu.
So I think AI, not just in our organization, but in BFSI, is playing a huge role. Right? And it plays its role across the business value chain. Now, if I am to talk of human resources, we have AI chatbots, which actually start beginning to work for us from the time you start your sourcing and your screening and your first line of filtration of candidates during the entire recruitment cycle. Then we have AI partnering with us when it comes to identifying what learning need themes are emerging from our conversations with business, and what is the correlation and the causality, because sometimes there is no correlation. I might believe something is important for you as your manager, but does what I believe important for you actually really important for you, and is it driving growth in the way I want you to drive growth? May or may not be. So at the back end, that's where your entire AI comes in, drawing patterns, throwing up thematics that tell us that, hey, you know what? That this has been the performance of the individual over the last 3 years. This has been the repetitive feedback. So for the person to grow, assuming he's on a high fast track or a mediocre track, this year, these are themes that will be important to invest in. And is that resonating with what the manager is saying? So there is a connect there. In your engagement surveys, again, what are people saying, and how is that going to ensure that they will stay the organization? The typical railers and the derailers, the red flags and the green flags, all of this, again, a lot of that partnering with AI helps us throw deeper insights. So in multiple different ways, I'm sorry, you
Sorry,
said something.
your listening tools that you spoke about, the employee engagement surveys, you're both internal as well as external.
That's correct. Right? So from an HR side, there is so much that's happening with partnering of AI. And of course, I forgot when it comes to OD and learning and development, how you look at investing in a learning program and designing the program. So it speaks to all kinds of learning, right? Oral, kinesthetic, and what have you. So that this absolute neuro-linguistic inclusion as part of your learning design. Then how do you measure matrices? Today we have AI telling us, look at it this way for this kind of talent profile. So it's throwing a lot of meaningful data. However, having said that, I think the shift has to move from tech-led learning to tech-augmented learning for human evolution. Because when you're looking at it as tech-led learning, you're putting tech in the forefront. But if you're looking at tech-enabled, if you're looking at tech-augmented, then you're saying that there has to be somebody sitting on the driver's seat using tech as a means to an end, not as an end in itself. And I think that is the slope we are all walking on today. And yeah, there's where we are parked at.
Thank you so much for sharing those insights. Dr. Bindu, your thoughts, please.
Let me put it this way, okay? In today's world, AI is evolving, and it's evolving so rapidly that sometimes it feels like technology is sprinting Mark, and like policies like me are jogging to keep up. and that's why adaptability is becoming a survival skill for us, and we are not just talking about learning how to use these new tools, new platforms. We are talking about learning to stay relevant in a world that's constantly shifting. Yeah, and that's where I feel L&D becomes the mission critical. One might teach tech and AI, and one might feel as if it's overwhelming for us, but we can actually flip this. That's how I would like to look at it. We can actually turn these into learning opportunities, because it's these challenges that force us to pause and ask, while we are in it, that what is it that only humans can do? Where can machines enhance us and not replace us? How do we rethink our roles and responsibilities, and even the way that we have been making decisions, right? So now look at it. Skills like decision making, empathy, judgment, these are all our superpowers, and machines can, I don't think for a very long time machines can replicate that. So while, as Mark was telling, AI can augment us. So AI can automate such several routines. It can also make room for us to elevate the uniquely human aspects of our work. So this is what I feel. And as L&D leaders, I feel like we need to build, of course, we need to build the digital dexterity in every role, right? AI is not just the content, but also it can become a channel to personalize learning paths, to provide, as Mark was telling, instant feedback, to help us curating content. Right? So I feel I agree with what Mark says, that AI is the next big partner for us, but only if we can help people learn how to learn with it.
To add to what Bindu,
Yes, Mark.
just adding to what Bindu says, it's about looking at AI as a co-facilitator, but not as your replacement in L&D.
Wow.
And somewhere we need to be very careful, because the need to over-rely is very tempting. And that's what also makes us intellectually lazy, and we need to watch out for that.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thought, and I have a follow-up question on that, but I'll hold on because I kind of just will come back on that one. So I think Dr. Bindu, when you're speaking about rethinking of roles and how do you create those personalizations, and Mark was speaking about how do we ensure that with AI it's more data enabled rather than how do you ensure that, sorry, it's more about tech enabled rather than tech led. So that becomes extremely crucial. and some of the other pieces that he spoke about in terms of how AI is helping from responding to level 3, level 4 queries as far as employees are concerned to be able to take some other financial decisions. And I think we are at a important juncture in this conversation wherein we've looked at what are some of the key impacts that L&D needs to create for us to be able to drive those business matrices, and at the same time how AI is enabling us to move forward. So how do you think, and coming to the topic of the day, how do you think we can take it to 10x? How do you think we can actually leverage and build and have that exponential growth? Either of you can take it.
Okay. Yeah, Mark.
So I think, see, also looking at what 10x is going to be very important. 10x is not about adding another zero after your goals and say we have grown from X to 10x. 10x in many ways is a mind shift. And to make that happen, I think the importance of nurturing a learning environment which makes taking risks safer is very important. And to be very honest, organizations need to really make space for that, because it's one thing to say, I want to grow from X to 10x or from 2x to 7x. But to do that, you have to be willing to walk the path to make failure a part of your story, to celebrate attempts, if not outcomes, to make people realize that it might not happen overnight, but what will happen is people making more effort. And if they fail, we're not going to come down heavy on them, right? Because the fear of failure and the need for perfection driving this X to 10x is so high, given the limited constraints of time, that it puts people under a lot of pressure to follow set templates. And if you're going to follow a set template, the outcome will also be a set outcome.
There'll be no innovation.
There will be no innovation, which is what we are seeing in organizations today. So, you just can't be mouthing X to 10x if you're not willing to walk the talk and say, what are you doing to create a culture of continuous learning, to create psychological safety, to enable your managers to make failing a part of the success template. I know it's ironic that I'm using both the words in one sentence, but it is about building failing or failure into the success template. And if we are able to do that, I think there is why X to 10x, you can look at 25x.
I think those are really powerful terms, and I think it's a good segue, Mark, that you spoke about how do we bring psychological safety and innovation together, because we keep talking about break everything when it comes to innovation. And suddenly you're looking at how do I provide that psychologically safe environment for that psychological impact to happen. I'm not willing to let that mistake happen, and the fear that the employee constantly reels under what will be the consequences. I think that's a really, really important point, and I really love the word that you used in terms of nurturing a learning environment, engendering that that learning culture within the organization. So and
another point, Meghdut,
yes.
for interrupting, but it also calls for a systemic overhaul. Because look at your performance management system, look at your reward systems, look at your recognition systems. All of these reward outcomes in the shortest possible time. They reward efficiency. They reward effectiveness, but efficiency and effectiveness is again minimal input, maximum output. Minimum time, maximum output. Now, if that is going to be the success template of your organization, your behaviors will follow suit. So somewhere it calls for a systemic rehaul, because, if I'm not going to reward failure as well for the attempt, I will never see people attempt to fail in their desire to innovate. And then I'm going to end up struggling with the same problems that I am struggling with as I am currently right now.
And I think it just ties back beautifully to how we began this conversation in terms of how do you drive that mindset shift so that the behavior change happens, so that in today's talent economy where where emotion is the currency, you're able to drive that employee engagement through. And thank you so much for sharing some of these thoughts. Mark and Dr. Bindu, I'll just bring you in a moment. I think because employees want to learn, but every time you ask them, they say that we don't have the time. And when you go back and ask the leadership, there is the leadership which is preventing them from learning because they are only involved in getting them to do tasks. So how do you, like you just touched upon this, Mark, that how do you create that psychologically safe environment? So the thought that keeps the L&D leader, the HR leader awake at night shouldn't be whether how do I integrate AI as far as my learning and development and HR pieces are concerned, but how do I create that learning culture, and something that you just beautifully touched upon, so that I can create. Because one of the things that they say, one of the leaders was saying, is that it's not just important to create psychological safety, but also to be able to ensure that once you have created that psychologically safe environment for people to be able to voice their opinions, are you doing something about the voice that is getting heard? Is the impact getting created? So thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. Bindu. Yes.
See, talking about 10x, one of the biggest challenges that this 10x thinking brings is the mental inertia that people have. People are comfortable with what has worked so far. So there is always now I'm talking about a flip side of it. Okay, there's always a sense of safety in what is known, what is certain, and in many teams that becomes the default. This has always worked, so let's not disturb it. But here's the thing: 10x does 10x never comes with a comfort zone. It always comes with reimagining something which is completely different, almost seems unreasonable at first. And that is what scares people. And there is also, like you were talking from the management or from the leadership side, there's always a resource concern. See, it is always assumed that 10x growth means 10x money, 10x people, 10x effort. But that is not what it's all about. 10x growth really is about thinking smarter and not harder. So it's about, like I always say, changing the lens through the way in which we are approaching a problem, right? So, and when we are talking about BFSI, there's another layer to it. So there's compliance, there's regulation. So generally people worry, and rightly so, that if we try something radically different, we might run into issues. But here's the irony that I always come back to, that regulation doesn't stop innovation. Instead, they reshape it. So it just means that we need to be a little more intentional, a little more transparent, and a little more structured in how we are implementing our innovations, right? So creation of safe spaces, failing to learning, right? If as I agree, if we don't experiment, but how do we do that? How do we experiment? Can we break down these 10x ambitions into small micro steps? Like, for example, we can reflect on what could be the tiniest experiment that we can run today, that can bring us closer to that bold, compelling goal that we have. Let's say enhancing customer centricity across the bank. So one of the micro steps could be: can I create a customer story of the week series in our morning huddle meetings, where an employee narrates, right? So and this costs nothing, right? It builds empathy, and slowly you see that nudging to a mindset shift towards what we always strive for: service excellence, right? So having that unconstrained question could be the beginning, where imagine if it was completely unconstrained, if regulation, budget, legacy system, nothing were a barrier, what would we do? And this could open our door to a very bold thinking, right? So then we can reverse engineer, and that works within reality.
Absolutely. And I think there's a very important point that you just mentioned in terms of homeostasis, things which is in terms of constant mental inertia that we have in terms of keeping the internals the same despite whatever is happening in the outside world. Because for the longest time, we looked at AI as a monster. And then finally, they said that the train has left the station. We need to adapt and embrace it. So I think that's
Meghdut,
yes, please.
yeah, Meghdut, now we need to understand how this shift happens too. I mean, it has to be step by step, idea by idea. Sometimes people assume that 10x feels like a fantasy, right? But it is actually more of a shared possibility.
Absolutely. And I'll probably ask this to you because Mark also spoke about the fact that about how do you bring about change in terms of systemic management performance conversations today that we have today, because today's performance conversations, and since you spoke about creating a psychologically safe environment, you could have uh, two different team members in your team, and one is killing it with Copilot and Chat GPTs, whereas the other is struggling with it. So in your performance conversations, how do you ensure that you will be able to have that extremely empathetic and inclusive conversation without making somebody feel who's lagging behind? So do you think, considering the fact that with so much of AI personalization that's happening, and that's the amount of learning that's today available for employees, the amount of information that's available, um, do you think training need identification would become completely redundant? And would organizations start measuring failures as the muscle memory of the organization? What are your thoughts on that?
Um, s- uh, well, I don't think that training need analysis would phase out. Yeah, let me explain that. And I think I have explained this before too. That it's true that everything, it's good to have it real time. It's good to have personalization. Good to have flexibility in our L&D. But think of it this way, okay? We are catering to, and I'm talking about public sector banks, that we're catering to workforce that spans generations. Okay, we have got job profiles which are as varied, as diverse as you can imagine. We've got learning styles which are completely diverse, right? So some of our workforce, like Gen Zs, want bite-sized learning on mobile. Others prefer podcasts. Some still value structured in-class training. So it's for us. It's training need analysis play a very very significant role, and we also realize, okay, as L&D we understand that it's no longer pushing out content, or it is all about creating experiences that are relevant, that are contextual, and that are also accessible. And so we are aware of it, and we are trying to see how we can embed real-time learning with try attempting the AI powered nudging, right? And there are so many banks from whom we take inspiration from, like ICICI, from Kotak, from DBS, right? And for us to, we do not consider learning as just a tick in the box, but it's something which genuinely helps people perform better, stay relevant. And while we are using technology, we are trying to see, the challenge we face is that sometimes we feel that we might be pushing things far, right? And we're looking forward to how do we make our employees take ownership, right? And they don't feel as if they are being pushed, or they feel as if they're pulled into learning on their own schedules. So uh, we feel that that for it we have to open our doors. L&D is not just a department. How can we make L&D a habit, right? And that's the kind of future that we are also working towards building.
Wow, I'm sure habit is something that I take back from this one, in terms of how do you ensure this becomes part of the culture, and the fact that you're able to really hear those listening tools to be able to create that impact. And incidentally, there is the data says that last year, as in 24-25, and in-person sessions had a huge, the number of in-person sessions was the highest recorded in the last 4 years across organizations. So absolutely. Mark, your thoughts?
So I think, L&D should have the permission to prototype, to pivot, and to pilot. I think that should be the new metric for L&D, because that is where L&D actually speaks to partnering from X to 10X. If you give it the permission to do these 3 Ps, I think you're building enough metrics to make the organization psychologically safe, to build capability that speaks to business growth.
So, I actually lost you. Can you repeat the 3 Ps once again, please?
Prototype, pivot, and pilot.
And how do you mean, Mark? Could you just elaborate a little more?
I think design thinking. Basically, what this is telling us is to use the fundamentals of design thinking, which is, I mean, a lot of people are using it as a buzzword, but it's been there in a different name and form for the longest. You start with empathy, where you actually go and listen to what your customer is saying, listen to what your people are saying, listen to what your managers are saying. I think we've lost the art of listening, because somewhere down the line, there's a lot that is emerging in the listening. And from there, your entire ideation piece, your experimentation piece, that's where the entire ethnographic research comes in. Your personification, where you put different personas and say, okay, let's try this hypothesis with this kind of a persona. Let's see if it works. To what extent will the needle move? Now, to tangibilize that, if I'm going to be putting out a product, I don't know whether there is a need for that product, but can I create personas of purchasers who are interested in buying that product? And each of the personas there will work with a certain narrative. So how does my product address that narrative? 40%, 50%, 60%, and that's where the prototyping, that's where the pivoting, that's where the piloting comes in, and where you get the largest hit in terms of where the prototype that you built is actually speaking to the persona in terms of the largest overlap. That is something that you might want to move to the next level at. So, it calls for things like that, just to give you an example.
Absolutely. Just using the design thinking process at every customer touch point.
Absolutely. And your customer could be both internal and external.
Absolutely. And Dr. Bindu, what I heard you say is that how can you make the customer as the true north and ensure that every other department and function within the organization is also completely aligned and tailored to that. We're almost getting to the close of this, and this conversation is extremely powerful and so enriching. I would love to continue, and I wish I had another hour, but I'll probably ask my last question to the two of you, and then probably we have tons of questions coming in from the audience, and it's the same question for both of you, and please feel free to answer as per what you believe how you see it. So, as experienced architects, as narrative shapers, as growth enablers, as change agents, as key influencers, as decision makers, as leaders, people who have the CEO's ear. In the next 6 to 12 months, what kind of change initiatives individually would you like to bring about in your organization?
I will take the question first. See, I am in this journey, right? I have been in the BFSI for quite some time now, and the difference that I would like to bring in would be we have been focusing on growth for this long. We have always been talking about, let's say, increase 50 odd branches, or maybe recruit more 1,000 odd relationship managers, or increase the book size by 10% year on year. So what I would like to do intentionally would be, how can I scale fast and fix later? Because I don't think we have the luxury of time now because of the kind of competition that is in play, right? And however, I'm also conscious of the fact that this is a domain where any misstep, doesn't only cause a lost customer, but it can also cause a lot of damage in the public confidence, right? So I'm going to what I'm going to do is I'm not only going to look at scaling products, but I'm also going to look at how do I scale the trust that I can build. We have our bank is believing in a lot of strategic initiatives, and one of them is what we call it RISE this year. In that, the E stands for employee and customer engagement, right? So how do I scale engagement? Okay, how do I go a step further towards making my bank more secure, more compliant, more sustainable? How can I make this work in our favor? How can I leverage the distinct advantages that we have now with account aggregators that is unparalleled? The massive opportunities that our country is now heading towards, or the demographic advantages that we have of young mobile first users and quick adopters. So how do I, and also the major headwinds that we have of legacy infrastructure, of maybe a little bit of updation of technology and updation of mindsets, right? So these are a couple of bigger challenges that we have, and I'm trying to bring some change in the way that things are working here.
Thank you so much for sharing that in terms of how do you create customer experiences and exceed customer experiences through your tool sets, your mindsets, and the skill sets that you bring on the table. Dr. Bindu, Mark, your thoughts, please.
So the change I would like to work on and bring, and in some way we've already begun our journey there, is moving towards a high touch and a high tech continuous learning culture. Right? Because I think I see it as a way to bridge complexity in terms of the times that we are living in to drive innovation, which is going to create sustainable growth. And how do we use high touch and high tech? Like I said, tech augmented, not tech led, to drive continuous learning.
Absolutely. How do you ensure that you're able to have a human-centric approach
That's correct.
to the entire thing, and at the same time, without technology, we will never be able to scale it. So thank you so much, Dr. Bindu and Mark. It's been an absolute pleasure. Probably, I think in the green room, if I can continue this conversation, but in the meantime, I would like to take questions from our audience. So our first question is from, it says anonymous here, but as leaders yourselves, what's a personal learning habit or ritual that you've adopted that helps you stay growth steady? Yeah.
Mark?
I don't know if there's any one way to answer that question, but I will try, and don't judge me for it. What I do, see, I think by nature, I am very curious as a person. And I know there are different kinds of learning types. My learning type is motivated largely by curiosity. It doesn't mean that it has to have an outcome. I am genuinely curious by nature. So if there is a post that I read and some content in it has spoken to a brain in me, I will go up further, I will read, I will make myself sufficiently intelligent in that space to at least know what it talks about. Right? So for me, I think reading in many ways and listening to what people are talking about is a big way of learning. The other aspect of learning for me is doing. So I also like to experiment in my own way. So, and my bosses will tell you that. I mean, I'm all the time, you know, it comes up, right? So whenever there are tasks to be done, they know that I'm going to be looking at a little experimentation to see whether things are working in better in one way or the other. So I'm always told, don't spend too much of time on the experimentation, get going ahead with it. And of course, a jest, I'm given the space to do that. So I like doing that. So the moral of the story is I learn both by reading and listening to people, and I also learn a lot by doing. And what gives me the permission to do that is I'm doing this for myself. I don't seek validation, and I don't seek an appreciation from somebody else, because if I do that, then I'm doing it with an ulterior motive of doing it for someone else and not doing it for me. So being courageous, because very often I see a lot of my team members come and ask me, if I do this, will it lead to this? If I do that, will it lead to that? What do you think people will say if I learn this? Will it be seen as right? I think we need to shed that, because what is happening when we do that is we're not really learning for ourselves. We are learning for someone else. So yeah, long story short, be brave, honest in your learning.
We'll be very happy to know that as per the World Economic Forum, the future skills for 2030, curiosity and lifelong learners are the two skills that are right up there. And what I hear you say is that knowledge is power, but knowledge when applied is powerful.
That's correct.
And yes, and the fact remains. I think the last point that you just made in terms of that the competition is not with anyone else, the competition is me.
Absolutely.
I think that's beautifully said, Dr. Bindu.
Yeah, I mean, completely resonated with what Mark and Meghdut you also added. I would like to scaffold it by just saying that opportunity is abundant. Yeah, and it's just it's just a shift in the mindset which is required. Let's not stay in the comfort zone, because 10x doesn't come in the space of our comfort. We need to challenge ourselves and keep challenging, keep learning. I think forums like these, where we listen to opinions, we listen to how people think about how ideas get spoken about. I think attending such forums, going all out, and believing in yourself. That's the first thing. Believing in yourself. I think all these things which have led to the kind of successes that maybe the little accomplishments that I have made, I feel it comes from this. And especially, I always see whenever such discussions happen, I tend to touch upon the fact that the diversity, the women empowerment, that's also must. So as a woman, I feel it's even more important that I have to be true to myself. I have to. I should trust. I should not have that glass ceiling, kind of a mindset, but try to break that and get out and do it.
Sorry, please finish.
Yeah, I'm done.
I think just before the session began, we were speaking about human-centered leadership, and something that really stands out, as you just shared, humility. I think that really stands out for you, and the fact that you're not just writing this and speaking for women, you're also living it in your own life. And the fact that you are your own true ambassador, you are your own true biggest advocate because you believe in your own ability. So thank you so much for sharing that. Our next question is from Rupali. Rupali says, when an organization sets out to scale 10x, how does the L&D strategy shift? And there's a part to that question as well. What do you stop doing and what suddenly becomes non-negotiable? Would you like me to repeat the question once again?
Yeah.
When an organization sets out to scale 10x, how does the L&D strategy shift? What do you stop doing and what suddenly becomes non-negotiable?
Yes. I think I really liked how Mark started his response to 10x, where he said, we need to debunk this myth, that 10x is not about 10 times more work. It's not about pushing our teams harder or setting unrealistic targets. Okay, it is about that shift. It's about rethinking. It's about not being incremental, right? And I've also mentioned earlier that it's only possible when we ask these unconstrained or not the traditional conventional way of asking whether if things needn't be done the way they have always been done, how would we solve this? For example, now, and I know banks that have done it. How about asking a question that, if we have to reduce the loan processing time from 3 days to 2 days? Now, this is a very generic question that everybody asks, versus asking, how do we approve loans in 3 seconds? Or let's take another example of underwriting. We know that traditionally it takes days of paperwork. It requires a lot of manual verification and human discretion. And a 10x thinker will not just say, let's add more underwriters. They would ask, what if we have to assess social media or mobile usage or GST records? So that's when the AI powered credit engines happen. And for it, what must we do? Right, we as L&D, we have to prepare our employees to trust those data, to understand those models, to engage our customers through such digital tech first processes. Yeah. We cannot afford to have a 3-day workshop in our training centers, where we come with some refresher course. Rather, the 10x approach would be, what if the learning followed the employee, and instead of employee following the learning? So we have to be, like Mark said, we have to be stopping to ask, what kind of learning do you want? Instead, what kind of transformation are you aiming for? That's when that personalized learning nudges, those bite-sized videos, just-in-time coaching with WhatsApp bots, some gamified modules. So here, now that's the lens that I've always been talking about. We need to change that.
Absolutely. So in yesterday's session, I think what you just shared, there's a very beautiful quote by Peter Drucker. It says the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence, but it is to act with yesterday's logic. So don't look at tomorrow's problem with yesterday's solution. So I think that's beautifully said, Dr. Bindu, and thank you so much for those insights. And as Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, says that attrition is your friend, attrition is your ally. It's not bad. So I think you spoke about efficiency. So it's not always about increasing headcount. It's about how do you bring those efficiencies without doing that. Mark, would you like to also take a stab at that?
Sure. So I think, when an organization sets to scale 10x, you're obviously talking about scaling, right? So when you're saying, how does the L&D strategy shift? We also need to understand scaling is, like I said, and like, Dr. Bindu also reiterated, it's not just adding that zero to your at the end and saying, hey, we've grown. That, of course, but not only that. So scaling, to my mind, is about intelligent design for replicability and amplification, right? And to have that intelligent design, you have to prototype, you have to take risks, you have to be willing to experiment. So what is non-negotiable is your willingness to take risks and your learnability. Because in the absence of learnability, you will not take risks. In the absence of not taking risks, you will not be able to work with intelligent design, prototype, pivot, pilot, and there will be no partnering for scaling of growth. So I think what is non-negotiable, and I've started the other way around, is learnability and the willingness to take risk. Of course, it comes within the boundaries of speed, and your speed is, nobody is asking you to come down to nanoseconds. Because very often when we talk about speed, people imagine speed is about crunching it to nanoseconds. Speed is not about crunching it to nanoseconds, but speed is about getting to the market first, right? So if people are taking 5 years to get to the market, can you cut it down by 2 years and be there at 3? That is sufficient time, but maybe not sufficient enough in the way our brain perceives. But to do that, you have to take quicker risks, fail faster, try harder. So that is something that is a non-negotiable. What do you stop doing? I think you really can't stop doing anything, because when you do this, it's like working with a moving vehicle, right? So you can't suddenly stop a part from moving. It will end up junking the car. It'll end up bringing the car to a sudden stop. So you've got to be very gently phasing things out. You can't just stop them from working, because as human systems, it's not binary in terms of start, stop. There has to be a gradient between what you have started in the past, which is not working and you need to stop. So how do you disincentivize it, slowly phase it out, is something that we need to do. Very often organizations adopt a black and white approach. We were doing this all these years as legacy organizations and systems. Let's stop it from tomorrow, or let's stop it from the next month. Doesn't work, because there is behavioral inertia. And you can't suddenly bring it to the stop because, the entropy will kill you. You're building so much of, there's so much of kinetic energy built along the pathway that you suddenly bring it to a stop, it will explode the system. You have to gradually phase it out by creating vents and then introduce newer systems. So you're working with a vehicle where you have to replace the carburetor, but the vehicle also has to be managed in such a way that you're not bringing it to a stop. That's all I have to say about it.
Thank you so much. And all of this, as you spoke about being able to take risks, being innovative in a psychologically safe environment, I'm sure that's the kind of organization that we will be able to provide. And on the replicability piece that you spoke about, it's about doing the things day in and day out, doing the mundane stuff, the dirty stuff, because that's what eventually leads to the 10x growth. Thank you. Yes.
Dude,
Yes.
I have a hard stop here.
Yes, absolutely. We have a hard stop too. Thank you so much. So maybe we'll send the rest of the questions as well to you, and maybe in case there's a possibility for you to be able to respond. But thank you so much. I really truly appreciate from the bottom of my heart the time that the two of you have taken, sharing your own life experiences, the kind of amazing work that you're doing in your respective organizations, and to be able to create a roadmap for our listeners here. So thank you so much once again for making time for this session, Dr. Bindu Nambiar and Mark Fernandes. It's been an absolute pleasure hosting you at BFSI's Learning Week, powered by KNOLSKAPE. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Bindu.
Thank you, Mark. Bye.